On March 3, 1978, Dr. Arjun Mehta filled prescription number 4721. It was for a 10-year-old girl named Priya. Severe infection. The doctor prescribed Ceftalox, a powerful antibiotic manufactured by Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Standard treatment. Routine procedure. Arjun had filled this same prescription hundreds of times. But that night, Priya's mother returned to the pharmacy, hysterical. Her daughter was having seizures. Her lips had turned blue. The hospital said it was an allergic reaction, but something about it didn't make sense to Arjun. He'd been a pharmacist for 17 years. He knew allergic reactions. This was something else. So he did something pharmacists are never supposed to do. He opened the medication and tested it himself. What he found would lead to the biggest pharmaceutical scandal in Indian history. A conspiracy that reached from rural clinics to corporate boardrooms in Switzerland. A cover-up that had already killed thousands. And a choice that would force Arjun to decide between his family's safety and the lives of strangers he would never meet. This is the true story of the man who discovered that the medicine meant to save lives was actually ending them. And what happened when he refused to look away. Arjun didn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Priya, about the seizures, about the way her mother described her daughter's reaction. It didn't match anything in the medical literature. By morning, he'd made a decision. He started keeping records. Every time he filled a prescription for Ceftalox, he followed up. He called the families. Asked how the patient was recovering. Most said fine. Normal recovery. But some said other things. Headaches that wouldn't stop. Dizziness. In 3 cases over 2 months, parents reported seizures in their children. Seizures that started within hours of taking the medication. The doctors blamed underlying conditions. Coincidence. Bad luck. But Arjun saw something else. He saw a pattern. He brought his concerns to Dr. Sharma, the town's most respected physician. Sharma listened politely, then told Arjun he was overreacting. Ceftalox had been approved by India's Central Drug Standard Control Organization. It was manufactured to international standards. Thousands of doctors prescribed it daily. If there was a problem, someone would have noticed by now. Arjun wanted to believe him. It would have been easier to believe him. But he couldn't ignore what he was seeing. So he expanded his investigation. He wrote to pharmacists in neighboring districts. He asked if they'd noticed anything unusual with Ceftalox. Out of 47 letters he sent, 12 pharmacists wrote back. 8 of them reported the same pattern. Seizures. Neurological symptoms. Always in children. Always within hours of taking the medication. This wasn't coincidence. This was systemic. Arjun compiled his data into a 23-page report. He documented every case, every symptom, every timeline. Then he did something that would change everything. He sent it to Meridian Pharmaceuticals headquarters in Mumbai. He expected concern. Investigation. Immediate recall. What he got instead was silence. For 6 weeks, nothing. Then a letter arrived. Brief. Professional. Dismissive. Meridian thanked him for his feedback. They assured him their quality control was rigorous. They suggested the reported reactions were likely unrelated to their product. The letter was signed by someone in customer relations. Not a scientist. Not a doctor. Someone whose job was to make problems go away. Arjun should have stopped there. He had a wife, Lakshmi, who taught at the local school. 2 sons, ages 12 and 14, both brilliant students. A pharmacy that had been in his family for 3 generations. A reputation built on trust and discretion. Speaking out further wouldn't just risk his career. It would risk everything. But 2 weeks after receiving Meridian's dismissive letter, something happened that made silence impossible. A 6-year-old boy named Ravi died. He'd been treated for pneumonia with Ceftalox. Within 8 hours, he experienced violent seizures. Brain swelling. By the time his parents got him to the regional hospital, it was too late. The official cause of death was listed as complications from pneumonia. But Arjun knew better. He attended the funeral. He couldn't stop himself. He stood in the back, watching Ravi's father, a man he'd known for years, collapse beside his son's small body. That night, Arjun made a choice that terrified him. He took his research to the Bombay Medical Journal, India's most prestigious medical publication. The editor, Dr. Vikram Desai, read Arjun's report over the course of 3 hours. When he finished, he looked at Arjun and asked a single question. "Are you absolutely certain?" Arjun said yes. The article was published 6 weeks later. Titled, "Unexplained Neurological Reactions in Pediatric Patients Treated with Ceftalox, a Multi-District Analysis." It was dry. Academic. Devastating. Within 48 hours, Meridian Pharmaceuticals issued a statement calling the article irresponsible fear-mongering based on anecdotal evidence. They threatened to sue the journal for defamation. They sent lawyers to Arjun's pharmacy. The lawyers were polite. They explained that Arjun had made serious allegations without conclusive proof. They suggested he publish a retraction. They mentioned that his pharmacy license could be reviewed if questions arose about his professional judgment. They noted that his sons were applying to university soon. It would be unfortunate if this controversy affected their prospects. Arjun told them to leave. Then he locked his pharmacy door and sat in the dark for hours, wondering if he'd just destroyed his family's future for a truth nobody wanted to hear. But Arjun wasn't alone. His article had reached someone who mattered. Dr. Priya Banerjee was a toxicologist at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi. She'd lost a niece to unexplained seizures 3 years earlier. The child had been on Ceftalox. When she read Arjun's research, something clicked. She contacted him immediately. Together, they designed a proper clinical investigation. Dr. Banerjee had resources Arjun didn't. Access to laboratory equipment. Connections to other researchers. Most importantly, credibility that came with institutional backing. They tested samples of Ceftalox from different batches, different regions, different time periods. What they found was horrifying. The medication itself was fine. The chemical formula was correct. But the manufacturing process had a fatal flaw. Meridian had cut costs by using a cheaper binding agent. This agent was supposed to be inert, harmless. But when exposed to heat and humidity, common in Indian storage conditions, it degraded into a compound called ethylmercuric phosphate. A neurotoxin. In adults, the doses were small enough to cause minor symptoms at worst. But in children, especially those under 12, the toxin accumulated in brain tissue. It caused swelling, seizures, in severe cases, death. The terrifying part was how predictable it was. Every batch manufactured after 1975 had this flaw. The problem wasn't contamination or a manufacturing accident. It was built into the cost-saving measures that made Ceftalox profitable. Meridian knew. They had to know. Their quality control department had to have flagged this. But Ceftalox was their best-selling antibiotic. It generated over 40 million rupees in annual revenue. Recalling it would bankrupt the company. So they made a different calculation. They decided the risk was acceptable. Dr. Banerjee and Arjun published their findings in The Lancet, one of the world's most respected medical journals. This time, there was no dismissing it as anecdotal. This was hard science. Peer-reviewed. Undeniable. The response was immediate. The Indian government launched an investigation. Meridian Pharmaceuticals stock crashed. The CEO resigned. And then the death threat started. The threats came by mail. typewritten letters with no return address. They described Arjun's daily routine with disturbing accuracy. The route his sons took to school. The time his wife left for work. The corner where he bought his morning newspaper. The message was clear. Stop talking, or everyone you love will pay. Arjun hired security for his family. He started varying his routes. He stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. But he didn't stop talking. He testified before a parliamentary committee investigating Meridian. He gave interviews to every newspaper that would listen. He traveled to villages across India, warning doctors and pharmacists about the contaminated medication. Dr. Banerjee faced her own battle. She was removed from her position at AMS. The official reason was budget cuts. The real reason was pressure from pharmaceutical industry lobbyists who donated millions to the institute. She lost her lab, her research funding, her career. But she didn't stop either. Meanwhile, Meridian's legal team launched a counteroffensive. They produced their own studies showing Ceftalox was safe. They hired expert witnesses who testified that Arjun and Dr. Banerjee's research was flawed. They claimed the deaths were caused by underlying conditions, not their medication. They spent over 15 million rupees on a public relations campaign portraying themselves as victims of a witch hunt. It almost worked. Public opinion began to shift. Some newspapers questioned whether Arjun was motivated by a personal vendetta. Others suggested he was being paid by competitor pharmaceutical companies. The doubt they sowed was effective. But then something happened that Meridian couldn't spin away. An internal memo leaked. It was dated July 1976. 2 years before Arjun's first report. The memo, written by Meridian's head of quality control, explicitly warned that the binding agent degraded into a neurotoxin under certain storage conditions. It recommended switching to a more expensive but stable alternative. The response from the CEO was included in the same document. One sentence. Current formulation is cost-effective and within acceptable risk parameters. No changes at this time. They knew. For 2 years, they knew their medication was poisoning children. And they decided profit was more important than lives. The leaked memo changed everything. Within 72 hours, Meridian Pharmaceuticals was raided by government investigators. Criminal charges were filed against 5 executives, including the CEO. Ceftalox was immediately recalled from every pharmacy, clinic, and hospital in India. The total number of affected medications exceeded 2 million units. Independent investigations confirmed what Arjun and Dr. Banerjee had proven. The contaminated batches had been in circulation since 1975. Conservative estimates suggested the medication had caused neurological damage in over 8,000 children. At least 400 deaths could be directly attributed to the neurotoxin. 400 children who would still be alive if Meridian had chosen safety over profit. The criminal trials lasted nearly 3 years. The CEO and 2 other executives were convicted of criminal negligence and sentenced to prison. Meridian Pharmaceuticals declared bankruptcy. The victims' families received compensation, though no amount of money could undo the damage. But here's what most people don't know about this story. The part that doesn't make it into the history books. Arjun's pharmacy never recovered. The controversy, the media attention, the association with the scandal, even though he was the hero, it destroyed his business. People avoided his pharmacy. They went to competitors instead. Within 2 years, he was forced to close the shop his grandfather had opened in 1923. His sons both got into university, but Arjun couldn't afford to send them. They had to take loans and work multiple jobs to pay their way through. His wife Lakshmi developed severe anxiety from the stress and death threats. She retired from teaching early. Dr. Banerjee never worked in institutional research again. She opened a small clinic in rural Bengal, treating patients who couldn't afford city doctors. She never published another scientific paper. Both of them paid everything they had for doing the right thing. But here's what they saved. After Ceftalox was recalled, researchers analyzed illness and mortality rates in Indian children. In the 3 years following the recall, pediatric seizure-related deaths dropped by 43% in regions where Ceftalox had been widely prescribed. Over the next decade, an estimated 40,000 children who would have been exposed to the contaminated medication lived normal, healthy lives instead. 40,000. That's not a metaphor. That's 40,000 actual children. 40,000 futures. 40,000 families who never had to bury a child because two people decided truth was more important than safety. In 2003, 25 years after Arjun first reported his concerns, the Indian government established the Adverse Drug Reaction Monitoring System. It was created specifically because of the Ceftalox scandal. Today, it monitors medication safety across the country and has prevented dozens of similar tragedies. Arjun lived to see it happen. He died in 2008 at age 73. His obituary in the Times of India was 3 paragraphs long. It mentioned his role in the Meridian scandal in the second paragraph. Most people who read it probably didn't even know who he was. Dr. Banerjee is still alive. She's 81 now, still running her clinic in rural Bengal. She was awarded the Padma Shri, one of India's highest civilian honors, in 2015. When asked how she felt about the recognition, she said she would have preferred better funding for rural healthcare. There's a moment in this story that defines everything. It's easy to miss because it's quiet, undramatic. But it's the moment that matters most. It happened 3 months after Arjun published his first article. His 12-year-old son, Rajesh, asked him a question at dinner. He asked, "Papa, why are you doing this? Why don't you just stop? Everyone says you're making things worse." Arjun didn't answer right away. He finished his food. Then he said something that Rajesh remembered for the rest of his life. He said, "Because if I stop, who will those children scream to in the night when the seizures come? If I stay quiet because it's easier, because it's safer, because it's smarter, then I'm just another person who knew the truth and chose comfort instead. And I can't look at myself in the mirror knowing I made that choice. So I won't." That's the real story. Not the investigation. Not the scandal. Not even the 40,000 lives saved. The real story is the moment when an ordinary person sees something wrong and makes the extraordinary choice to pay whatever it costs to make it right. Arjun wasn't a hero because he won. He was a hero because he was willing to lose everything for people he'd never meet. And in a world that constantly tells us to mind our own business, to not make waves, to think about our own families first, that choice is revolutionary. The pharmaceutical industry changed after Meridian. Regulations tightened. Oversight improved. But the real change was quieter. It was in the pharmacists who started asking harder questions. The doctors who looked more carefully at adverse reactions. The patients who demanded to know what was in their medication. Arjun started a ripple that's still moving. Every time someone speaks up about unsafe practices, every time a whistleblower risks their career for public safety, every time truth wins against profit, Arjun's choice echoes forward. His pharmacy is gone. His name is largely forgotten. But 40,000 people are alive because one man decided that truth was worth more than safety. And that's the legacy that matters.